Hey everyone! Today I want to talk about a part of history that doesn't really get much attention, but honestly, it was super important and played a big role in shaping the world. It's a place called Sogdiana. Now if you look at a modern map, this area would stretch across parts of Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. Back in the day though, this wasn't just some random region. It was right in the middle of huge empires and major trade routes. Basically, it was prime real estate, and whoever controlled it had serious power. Sogdiana first entered the stage of global history when Cyrus the Great, the famous founder of the Persian Empire, conquered it in the mid-6th century BC. After him, Persian kings kept it under their rule, using Sogdian soldiers in their armies and collecting tribute from the land. But things didn't stay that way forever. In 328 BC, Alexander the Great swept through Central Asia and added Sogdiana to his growing empire. After Alexander, the land continued to change rulers many times over. It belonged to the Seleucid Empire. Then the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom, later the Kushans, the Sasanians, the Hephthalites, the Turks, and eventually it became part of the Islamic world after the Muslim conquests. Each empire left a mark on Sogdiana, shaping its culture, language, and religion bit by bit. The beating heart of Sogdiana was the city of Samarkand, which became the center of culture, politics, and trade. This city later grew into one of the greatest cities in world history, but even back in Sogdian times, it was already a hub of activity. The people spoke Sogdian, an Eastern Iranian language that sadly disappeared over time. But it didn't vanish completely. Its legacy still survives today in a small language called Yanubi, spoken by a few thousand people in Tajikistan. In its prime, Sogdian wasn't just a local language. It spread widely as a language of trade, becoming a kind of bridge language across Central Asia. Even Turkic rulers used it to write their official documents. What made the Sogdians stand out wasn't just their home cities, but their ability to travel and adapt. They were known across Asia as some of the best traders and diplomats. They moved far beyond their homeland, setting up communities in Imperial China and rising to high positions during the Tang dynasty. They even reached the Byzantine Empire in the west. Along the way, they carried not only goods like silk, spices, and precious metals, but also ideas, religions, and art styles. In this way, they became one of the most important connectors along the Silk Road. They weren't simply merchants, they were cultural messengers. Religion in Sogdiana was very diverse. At first, many followed Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian faith, while others adopted Manichaeism, Buddhism, and even forms of Christianity. This shows how connected Sogdiana was to different cultures. But after the Muslim conquest of Central Asia in the 8th century, Islam began spreading fast. By the time the Samanid Empire ended in 999, almost all Sogdians had converted to Islam. Around the same time, their old language faded, giving way to New Persian, which became the dominant language in the region and still influences languages spoken there today. Geography was one of the main reasons Sogdiana was so important. The land stretched north of Bactria, east of Crimea, and southeast of Kangju, with the fertile Zoroastrian Valley right in the middle. This valley made farming possible, helping Sogdian cities grow strong. Over the centuries, Sogdian influence even stretched far to the east, reaching areas around Istanbul. It was truly a land positioned in the middle of everything. Even the name Sogdiana has a fascinating background. Experts believe it comes from an ancient Indo-European word meaning archer. In Old Persian, the land was known as Seguda, and over time that name evolved into Sogdiana. The meaning connects to the warrior traditions of the people who lived there, showing how their identity was tied not only to trade and culture, but also to strength in battle. The history of Sogdiana didn't just begin with Persia or Alexander. It stretches back thousands of years earlier. Archaeologists have found towns in the area as far back as the 4th millennium BC, like Sarazm in Tajikistan. By the 15th century BC, there were more developed towns such as Kök Tepe in what is now Uzbekistan. This means people were farming, trading, and living in organized communities in Sogdiana, long before big empires even arrived. Sogdiana was also sacred to Zoroastrians. In their holy book, the Avesta, it is mentioned as Gava, one of the good lands created by the god Ahura Mazda. That shows how deeply rooted Sogdiana was in the religious imagination of the ancient Iranians. When Cyrus the Great added it to his empire, it was already a well-developed land. Later, under Darius I, the Persians brought in things like new writing systems and coinage, and Sogdians became part of the empire's army. We even know that when Xerxes invaded Greece, Sogdian troops were among the soldiers marching with him. Life under the Persians also meant changes in population. When groups rebelled against Persian rule, they were often moved far from their homes. That's how Greeks ended up living in Sogdiana. The region itself didn't have its own governor, but was instead ruled from nearby Bactria. Even so, the Sogdians kept their culture alive until Alexander the Great marched in. Alexander's conquest wasn't easy. The Sogdians resisted fiercely under leaders like Spitamenes, who even joined forces with nomadic tribes like the Scythians. Alexander spent years fighting to secure the region, and one of his ways of gaining local support was through marriage. He famously married Roxana, the daughter of a Sogdian nobleman, and encouraged his men to marry local women as well. After Alexander's campaigns, Sogdiana was combined with Bactria and later absorbed into the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. From that point, their political independence began to slip away. Even after losing their independence, Sogdiana remained a key prize for incoming powers. Nomadic groups like the Sakas and the Yuezhi moved in, followed by the powerful Kushan Empire, which turned the region into an important center of commerce. Then came the Sasanians, the Hephthalites, the Turks, and finally the Arabs. Each wave brought something new, from coins and architecture to language and religion. Even though the Sogdians never built a massive empire of their own, they were so skilled at adapting and trading that they stayed influential for centuries. And the Sogdians ran their economy and handled diplomacy across such a huge area. Most traders on the Silk Road didn't travel the whole route from China to the Mediterranean. Instead, goods passed from one set of middlemen to another at oasis towns like Khotan and Dunhuang. Sogdian merchants were different. They built a network that stretched about 1,500 miles from Sogdiana to China. They were so famous for trading that people in the kingdom of Khotan called every merchant Suli, which meant Sogdian, no matter where that merchant actually came from. At first, the Sogdians learned trade from the Kushans. Together they controlled trade in places like the Fergana Valley and Kangju when the Silk Road was getting started. Later, after the Kushan power faded, the Sogdians became the main middlemen for long-distance trade. Their lands weren't one single empire with fixed borders. Instead, Sogdiana worked more like a chain of city-states, each oasis and town linked to the next. Through these cities, Sogdian traders connected Samarkand and other Central Asian towns to places as far away as Byzantium, India, Southeast Asia, and China. The Sogdians first made real contact with China after the explorer Zhang Qian visited the region during Emperor Wu of Han's rule. Zhang called the area Kangju, and his reports helped spark a lot more trade and diplomatic missions between China and Central Asia. Chinese records show that many large embassies were sent into the western regions during the 1st century BC, and Sogdians ended up playing a major role as go-betweens. For centuries, Sogdians acted as middlemen between the Han Chinese and the Parthian Empire to the west. Their language became the trade language across Central Asia by around the 4th century, and they kept playing that role right up to the 10th century. Sogdian merchants from Samarkand, today's Samarkand, became the most visible travelers on the Silk Road after Alexander's time. They didn't only move goods, they also spread religions such as Manichaeism, Zoroastrianism, and Buddhism along the route. Chinese histories like the Sui Shu describe Sogdians as naturally gifted merchants who learned the trade young. By the 4th century, some evidence even suggests they controlled much of the trade between India and China. A Sogdian letter from 313 AD warns merchants that, after Lu Kong sacked Luoyang, business there was ruined. Later in 568 AD, Sogdian merchants traveled with Turkic allies to Constantinople to ask permission to trade directly with the Byzantines. That mission offered silk to the Byzantine ruler and proposed an alliance against Persia. The Byzantines did send envoys back, opening a new political chapter, although archaeologists find only a small number of Roman coins in Central Asia and China, which suggests direct trade with Rome stayed limited.